Hello and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen. I'm an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa, and I present these videos every week for a couple of different reasons. The first of which is just to move my brain out of the mode of background work as I kind of do background work, excuse me, with the text for the week and move into the mode of actually writing and preparing the sermon that I'll preach to my congregation for the weekend. And the second reason I do these is just to allow you, the viewer, who have stumbled across this video for whatever reason, to gain some different insight into the assigned gospel text for the week. That is why I do these things. This particular Sunday, which is October 30th, 2016, we can call it one of two things liturgically. Big church word there. It is the 24th Sunday after Pentecost, and for congregations that will look that direction, the assigned gospel text comes out of Luke chapter 19. It's the story of Zacchaeus, which perhaps you're familiar with because Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. And so he climbed a tree, and Jesus was like, dude, what are you doing? Come down. Let's go hang out. Let's have some food. I like it. But that's one direction that things could go. Here within the Lutheran Church, in the Lutheran tradition, we celebrate this as Reformation Sunday because it is the closest Sunday to October 31st. If you are familiar, you kind of know what I'm talking about. If you're not, a tiny little bit of background: 499 years ago, Catholic priest slash monk slash professor named Martin Luther wanted to reform the Catholic Church. He thought that there were some issues with the way things were going on, and so he wanted to begin a debate within the scholarly and priestly circle to kind of try and resituate. So on Halloween Day, October 31st, he nailed his 95 Theses on the church door at Wittenberg Castle in Germany, and that sparked off the Reformation and eventually led to the establishment of many different Christian denominations, including the Lutheran Church, of which, of course, I'm a part. And so we celebrate that this Sunday. And because of that, every single year on Reformation Sunday, the assigned texts are the same within the lectionary. They don't change year to year like most of them do. So we've heard this before. The assigned gospel text comes out of John chapter 8, verses 31 through 36. Yes, 31 through 36, so it's a very brief little reading. But I have talked about this one before, actually twice before. This is my third time talking about this particular gospel lesson, so you can look back if you want to see some other thoughts to a year ago and then 2 years ago. Hard to believe I've been doing these videos that long, but apparently I have. And you can gain some other insight that way if you're interested, and I'll link, or not link, but I'll list those episode numbers down below in comments. So just be aware that's there. All that being said, how about we go ahead and jump into this? And if you've been following along, we've been in Luke's Gospel. We're actually almost done with Luke's Gospel. We've only got about another month before we wrap up year C, the year of Luke, here in the lectionary, and we move into the year of Matthew. That will start up actually the last Sunday of November, so a month from now. But here for Reformation Sunday, we jump into John, as I mentioned. Now, John is an interesting situation where we find it kind of here. This is right about in the middle, not quite middle, but maybe like a third of the way through. And we see in chapter 7 and chapter 8 of John's Gospel that Jesus is in Jerusalem for the Festival of Booths, one of the three big Jewish festivals that was very common for people to travel to Jerusalem and celebrate the festival there. Now, this isn't Passover. It's not their big one, but this is one of their three big ones. If you think, for instance, here in the Christian church, our big two are Easter and Christmas. And if we were to throw a third one in there, it would probably be Pentecost. Within the Jewish faith, Passover's a big one. Festival of Booths is another one. And then there's another one that admittedly, I apologize, but I'm blanking on it. I want to say it's the Festival of Tabernacles, but I think that's the same as the Booths. So anyway, I digress. regardless, Jesus is in Jerusalem, and over the course of these 2 chapters, he's in the temple a lot. Pretty much every day he went into the temple and he taught and he debated and had conversation with his disciples and with other Jewish people. And there's a lot of back and forth, lots and lots of opposition, lots of uh, also a lot of people listening to him, a lot of people hearing him, and we hear leading into where we're at here in the middle of chapter 8, that after his teaching, some of the Jewish people who have heard him, and they're just referred to as the Jews, some of the Jews, or many of the Jews, believed in him. That's verse 30. So that leads right into it. And that's important to note because those people who have just believed in him, we hear here, or we're about to hear, you said the word here like 5 times, that they immediately, like Jesus tells them one more thing, they believe in him and he kind of reveals, and this is what that means, and then they're like, whoa, hold on just a second. So that's kind of the setting of what's been going on. Just note that there's been a lot of bantering, there's been a lot of teaching, there's been a lot of debating, and all of that leads us now to this point. So with all that said, it's quite a bit of background there. Let's jump in. John 8, 31 through 36. Then Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, if you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. They answered him, we are descendants of Abraham and have never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean by saying you will be made free? Jesus answered them, very truly I tell you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not have a permanent place in the household. The son has a place there forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. All right, so that's the whole reading. Now, that's a really small portion of a pretty big back and forth argument. But what we see here as the tension within this particular moment is they have believed in Christ, they believed in Jesus, which in John's gospel, that is, well, that's faith, that's believing in Jesus, but believing that Jesus is God. And in John's gospel, sin, which is singular, is not believing that Jesus is God. And so if we've heard that they've believed him, okay, that means that faith is coming. But it begs the question, since they so quickly jump right back away from it, is it true faith? Are they just paying lip service? And we don't know. I'm not going to say one way or the other. It says in verse 30 that they believed him. Some translations might tweak that a little bit to say that they believed his words or they believed in him. There's some differences there within different translations, and there's also some ambiguity within the original language that doesn't exactly help very much. But regardless, their issue is what he says that first he says if you continue in my word, that Greek word meno, I love that. It means to abide or to remain or to stay, to live. So if you live in my word, if you continue in my word, if you stay in my word, whether it makes sense or not, but if you remain with it and continue with it, that's faith. That's continuing. If you continue to believe in my words, my words are truth, and truth sets you free. That's kind of his message. And they take this as the notion of being literal slave versus literal freedom, which is, I think, a mistake. For us here in America, we have a lot of freedoms that we really take for granted. At the same token, we don't have utter and complete freedom. If you have that, that's actually anarchy. But we have laws and rules and guidelines that we follow as well, and yet we still have freedoms that we are blessed to have. And is that what Jesus is talking about? No, I really don't think so. I think it's the freedom from the power of sin and death. That's what we're talking about here, and it's the freedom. We're freed from sin, which hinders our relationship with God. So much of a major theme in John's gospel is relationship, being in relationship with God. His invitation to the first disciples is come and see. come and experience, come and abide, remain with me, abide with me. We see it again here. It's a major theme. Abide together, remain with God. God will remain with you. And now, is it perfect? No, of course not, because the presence of sin and our flawed reality, the darkness in the world is still present. But we are freed from that. That's what Jesus is talking about. At least I think so. But for the Jewish people, for them, they're still clinging to their heritage. And that's what they're talking about. We are children of Abraham, and we've never been slaves of anyone. Which that's a load of hooey. If you think back in the Jewish history, they've been slaves to all kinds of people. In fact, they, as a people, started off slaves in Egypt. They, as a culture, I mean, we go all the way back to Abraham and the patriarchs, and then it trickles down to Joseph, who is Abraham's great grandson. Yeah, great grandson. He ends up taking everyone to Egypt. Long story short, and they multiply and they multiply and they multiply, and they're slaves in Egypt. So their culture begins as slaves. Never been slaves to anyone. Yeah, right. There's also within Jewish history or Israel's history two different captivities: Babylonian, the Assyrian captivity, when different portions of the nation were taken over and they were hauled off into exile. So that's in there. At this particular time, they are subject to the Roman Empire. So it's like, we're free. Yeah, no, you're not. Baseball. But so that aspect is in there, and it's like, okay, pull off your blinders. Yes, you may be physical descendants of Abraham. And Abraham is, of course, the recipient of the promise, the great covenant of the Old Testament. And that's important. And through our faith in Christ, we also join in that covenant that God made, that promise that God made. But it's not because, in this case, it's not because of the Jewish heritage that they are recipients of that promise. It's through our faith, through believing that God's going to do what God says he'll do. And there's different aspects in here, both within the individual reading as well as the larger structure of this overarching argument or debate that Jesus is having. But if the Son makes you free, then you are free. The Son makes you an heir. An heir to what? An heir to the promise. It's not because of your heritage. It's because of your faith in Christ, or it's because of the Spirit working within you that makes this all possible. For us, it's impossible. For God, it's possible. And as I think about that, I think it's important to keep this in mind, especially on Reformation Sunday. On Reformation Sunday, we are remembering that our history that led us to this time, that split us away from the Catholic Church, 500 years ago, or almost 500 years ago, and now in this day and age, maybe not so much now as, say, 30 years ago or 50 years ago, or maybe longer. I guess that's general history-wise. That's as far back as I can think. But the notion of denominations, those lines are starting to get pretty blurry. And granted, there are individuals who will probably disagree with me on that, and there are even times when I'll disagree with myself on it. But the denominational lines are starting to get blurry for people, and I think that's okay. Compared to in the past when, oh, you're a Catholic, or oh, you're a Lutheran, or oh, you're a Methodist, or so on, and so on, and so on. We have lots of different denominations. But those divisions were very, very concrete. And while they're still important now, I don't want to diminish that. The notion that our heritage, and for me in particular, Lutheran heritage, to say that I've got it right because I'm a Lutheran, and even within the Lutheran circle, we have different Lutheran denominations, and I'm the right one and you're not, and my interpretations are right and yours are wrong. When we rely on that, we're falling in the exact same trap that the people in today's story are falling into. That our heritage makes us right. Our heritage entitles us to this, and no, it doesn't. Christ alone makes this possible, and Christ alone enacts this within us, within our lives, in both the now and the not yet. And that's kind of a tangent. I'm not going to go into it very much. I'm looking at the time; it's already getting kind of long here. But the now and not yet. through Christ, relationship with God is once more made possible. Sometimes that's very easy for us to feel in our life of faith. Sometimes it's hard. If you caught my video from last week, you know I was talking very briefly. I didn't really go into it, but some hard stuff here within my community that has been going on for about the last week and a half now as I'm recording this, and that at times makes trusting our faith kind of hard. That's a reality. Sometimes that's the case, and it almost feels like, whoa, you know, I don't know if this is real or not. Full disclosure, sometimes we think that, and that's the not yet aspect of this. That there is more to come. That one day Christ will return and usher in a new heaven and a new earth and the age to come and into eternity. And what does that look like? And we don't exactly know. And yet we hope for that, and yet we live now secure in the promise that God has claimed us and that we are heirs to that promise. So that's what's happening here. And I'm thinking back to my past videos, and every time I get into this, it's such a short passage, but there's so much going on, and that's what's exciting. If you have thoughts, questions, comments, by all means, share those down in the comment section, and we can continue the conversation that way. My apologies, this has gotten a little bit long, a little bit more extensive background. Got the video a little longer than I try and shoot for. But anyway, I hope you have a great week. May God bless you this week and in the weeks to come, and we will catch you next time.